Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back, my lovelies, to another wonderful series, I hope. Hey, Kat. Today, we shall start a new series. It is a crossover series of Harry Potter and the Addams family, so viewer discretion is advised for the following topics. Death, bad language, gore, and mental issues sometimes. You have been warned. Now let's start with the prologue, simply called Harveste or Harveste. This lovely work has been written by Kyaru-Chan on fanfiction.net. I hope you will enjoy this macabre display of writing. He'd done it. It had been long overdue, but he finally done it. The knife in his hand gleamed under the stark white light of the living room chandelier. Blood, redder than rubies and twice as precious, stained the sharp edge, a few drops sparkling before they hit the floor. There was a whimper, quickly shushed. His rage simmered just below the surface. He could still feel its banked fire, but in a curious, detached manner, like seeing a sliver of something from under his cupboard door. It was still accessible, though. All he had to do was want it. Oh, and how he wanted it. To watch to anyone watching from the window, it must have seemed so strange. A small boy, no more than 5, standing like a predator over his prey. His black hair fell over his face, unkempt and unruly, but his eyes shone like emerald fire from under the fringe. In the corner, trying to fit into a shadow, hid a thin, long-necked woman, her arms barely reaching around a beach ball of a boy who was nursing a broken arm. The woman herself sported a few wounds, none of them immediately fatal, but he could remedy that. The stench of mortality was in the air, almost but not quite overpowered by the smell of fear and urine. The body of Vernon Dursley lay on the floor, looking for all the world like a beached whale. His piggy eyes were glazed over in death. Harry felt the urge to laugh welling up in him, but he restrained himself. His job wasn't done yet. His cousin was chasing him again. He was running as fast as he could, but overweight though he was, Dudley had the tenacity of a bulldog, and he knew the neighborhood better. Harry tripped over an uneven crack, and in a flash Dudley was on him, punching his face and stomach with his fast little fists. "Stupid little freak!" he yelled. "Who told you to look at my friends? Stupid freak! Stupid freak!" Those words, in a short life filled with neglect and pain, piled high with those abusive words, those few had been the last straw. Fury dropping over his eyes in a blood-red haze, he reached out, pulled, and struck. There was a crack. Dudley scooted off of him, his mouth already stretched around a whale, his face paler than a ghost's. His arm was bent at an unnatural angle, and he instinctively held it close to his body as he ran towards the house. Harry followed, quicker than a dart, his brain suddenly aflame with possibilities. His cousin ran straight for the living room, but that didn't matter. The kitchen did. "You son of a bitch! What have you done to my boy?" Harry's devilish insane grin had been the last thing his uncle ever saw. And now here he was, with 3 dead bodies and nowhere to put them. Harry sat back on his heels, tapping his lips idly with the tip of the knife. He had drawn the curtains, of course, and locked the door as well. He was young, not stupid. Is this the place, querida? Mama, Mama did say number 4 Privet Drive. The doorknob rattled, bringing Harry to attention. His head whipped around, venomous eyes narrowed. It's locked, Gomez, dear. Do you mind? Of course not. Anything for you, cara mia. There were faint smooching sounds, that then the snick of the lock. The hinges squealed, and then there were footsteps. I do wonder what Maman was talking about. You know how she gets when she's been at the crystal ball. Oh my! She's your mother, Tish. What? Oh! A tall, lanky man caught the knife as it was flung at him. His smile didn't waver. Nicely thrown, young man. Who are you? His hand was already closing around another knife. He had brought in the whole set from the kitchen to make sure he had everything he needed. And now there were intruders in his home. No matter what were 2 more bodies? But he didn't expect the woman, beautifully pale with dark shadowed eyes and a smiling crimson mouth, to crouch down next to him, the hem of her black dress inches away from the pooling blood. Her hand, strangely cold, closed over his, removing the knife. He let her, curiosity taking over as he looked up into her eyes. Her voice was like velvet over roses. Such a clever little darling. Do you want to tell us what happened? I killed them, he said, lifting his chin a little. There was no need to be ashamed of what he'd done. Not that they would understand. Good man, good man! The man chuckled, one finger smoothing over a thin mustache as he inspected the still warm bodies with the air of a wine connoisseur. A stand-up job, if I do say so myself. Your first time? Huh? Harry nodded, the ghost of bemusement making itself known. Well done! Glacial fingertips smoothed over his brow, across his scar, then over his cheek, smearing the blood specks there. He felt a twinge of pain, and he still had a black eye from a few days ago when Vernon had realized there was no milk in the ice box. They hit you, my little darling. Yes. Uh, will you wait here for a moment? At his nod, she smiled. There was a hint of a fang. Gomez, my love, we need to talk. Harry blinked as the 2 adults, still very much alive, moved into the kitchen. How strange! They didn't seem frightened or disgusted by what he'd done. He looked down at his cousin's bloated face still frozen with terror, and prodded the pudgy nose with his knife. He wasn't disgusted either. The weight of the blade had seemed so right in his hand. Its smooth glide into flesh, sending satisfaction through his core. It had been exhilarating, the first time he had ever felt the emotion in his life. He's got the even spark, doesn't he? Quite, darling. I'm wondering, would you ever consider? Their words washed over him. He couldn't concentrate on them now, though. He had work to do. Now, where did he put those plastic bags? He would make such a lovely playmate for Puxley and Wednesday. I don't know, Tish. Please, Boobele. What, Tish? You know what that does to me. Over the sounds of more smooching, Harry worked quickly and deftly, the steel flashing between his hands. He had jointed chickens before, forced by the Dursley when they were in a mood for something other than roast beef. This was no different, though the parts were bigger and much heavier. Shoulder, then elbow, then wrist. Harry cocked his head thoughtfully before starting on the fingers. The more weight was distributed, the easier it would be to dispose of. Though perhaps the hatchet would have been better, Uncle Vernon was a hassle even after death. A pair of strong-looking hands appeared beside him, each hefting a wickedly curved machete. The tall man smiled merrily at him, at odds with the fact that he was starting to saw at the obese flesh. "You go on with this, young man, and leave me to this. I haven't done a proper dismemberment in months." "You're strange." There was a soft laughter behind him, reminding him of lightning and midnight bells. "How right you are, little viper." Harry smiled at the nickname, and her laugh dwindled away into a pleased look. She looked at him and led him into the corridor. "Where is your room?" I don't have one. I live there." He pointed to the door of the cupboard under the stairs. Small though he was, he could almost brush the top of the door jamb with his head. It was as if the room had darkened, the gloom oozing from under every surface like thick tar. The lights flickered, dimming slightly. Harry looked up at the woman, who was suddenly standing as still as a tombstone. "I see." And then it was gone, and the lights warmed, and everything with their pale yellow glow. "You will make a fine addition to our family, little viper. Can you say sic gorgiamus allo subjectatus nunc?" Sic gorgiamus allo subjectatus nunc?" he repeated dutifully. "What does it mean?" "It's our family motto. It means we gladly feast on those who would subdue us." She smiled down at him, her teeth glinting like the edge of a saber. After a moment, Harry smiled back. "Daddy, who's that?" Harry, still wondering about the giant of a man who had opened the door, now blinked at the boy standing at the foot of the grand staircase. He had a lollipop in his mouth. His short build was thick with muscle, unlike Dudley, who had been, covered with blubber. He didn't seem threatening. Still, Harry shifted into a defensive stance at the movement, and a movement that Morticia noticed. Now, boys, let's not have any fighting before dinner. Huxley, this is your new brother. He's just killed his family." "Really? I'm so jealous." A bat-like screech sounded through the house, setting Harry's nerves on edge. Now that the euphoria was ebbing, he felt increasingly jumpy. A knife appeared in his hand as if out of nowhere. That's him, is it? Come now, look at me." A frizzed-haired woman hobbled towards him, one of the big double doors. From one of the big double doors. She was more wrinkled than anything, the epitome of old age, her face as pale as death. Harry caught a glimpse of bubbling cauldrons and roiling steam before he was caught in a hug that smelled strangely like lavender and locker-room socks. "Welcome, my pet!" "Maman, don't choke him. At least not yet." "What's his name?" "Why, I don't know, my little viper," Morticia cooed, a vampire's smile tainting her lips. "You never told us your name." "Does it matter?" Gomez said cheerfully, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "What is a name? A mindless destruction by any other name would be just as divine." Harry looked at all the smiling faces. He was so lost. This was all so strange, so sudden, so soon. But they hadn't flinched. They had accepted him and what he'd done. It was almost like they were used to it. He swallowed. They were all looking at him right now. It was a new feeling, being the center of attention in a good way. He liked these people, he realized belatedly. no matter that they were strange, with eyes that glimmered like blood drops under fluorescent light and skin colder than the inside of the icebox. The man with the pencil mustache had never stopped smiling, even when he was doing all the cleaning up and disinfecting afterwards. Not like Uncle Vernon, who had never mopped or dusted anything at all. He had even shown Harry how to set an old-fashioned alarm clock, though it had shown entirely the wrong time, and explained that a fuse cap was, and explained what a fuse cap was. The lady in the black dress had been nice too, the complete opposite of Petunia, and she had said she would like for him to be her son. Aunt Petunia had never said anything like that. If he stayed here, he would have a family of his own, and he would never ever have to share with Dudley ever again. That alone was enough of a reason to stay. Harry was suddenly reminded of a book he'd fished out of the trash, and the words sprung unbidden to his mind as fresh as the day he'd read them. Fear thee the harvest when it cometh, and the blood spill by righteous hands, and glory falleth not upon the vain, but upon those stained with life's own grace. So fear thou the harvest moon as it doth rise in velvet night, for death will engulf thy world, and he strangled thee with silent rapture's wings. Harvest, he whispered softly, almost shyly. My name is Harveste. Harry could still remember the first time he'd seen magic at work. It had been so simple, yet he felt so drawn to it. He had seen Morticia lighting candles on his first Halloween at 0001 Cemetery Lane, caressing the wicks gently before they burst into flame of their own volition. He had shivered when he saw it, felt the tingling something in the air as she continued on her sensuous way. She had seen and beckoned him over and shown him how. The Addams family was known for their use of obscure dark magic and more. It was part of the studies that he, Pugsley, and Wednesday were getting, along with the physical combat, potion, fencing, and ballroom dancing. The power was so easily accessible in their house due to it being practiced there for generations, but not anywhere else. It was one of the reasons the family was so indestructible, and it needed the constant flow of blood and pain to keep strong, something they eagerly provided every moonless night. The children had craved the exotic, drugging feeling of the pure magic. Harry more than most. It felt like home, like the warmest hug he'd ever received. He needed it so much it was scary. He had confided in his mother that first year, bearing his fears like an offal on a table. He knew he wasn't one of the family, so he had thought the pure magic would reject him and wouldn't answer him when he called. My little viper, she had whispered into his dark hair, so like her own. You are part of our family. I should know. I did the spell. Spell? Yes, darling. You are ours in every way, just as if I had given birth to you myself. You are Harveste Addams, and there is no one in the world that can take it back. How? I'll tell you when you're older. Lips colder than a new grave in winter brushed over his forehead. Just remember, there is nothing blood cannot achieve. Remember that, my darling viper, and everything will be fine. Under Grandma's tutelage, he grew to love potions. Wednesday excelled at dueling, being the only one to date that had actually gotten their father on his back and in a chokehold. Puxley just loved explosions, much to Lurch's chagrin. He was 6 years old, 10 months after the Addams had found him. He was paler now. His hair was longer, brushing over his once sunken cheeks. Grandma had taken it upon herself to feed him into near Puxley proportions. Somehow, no matter how much he ate, he never seemed to gain enough weight. It was probably high metabolism. Still, he had filled out and he could no longer trace his ribs under his shirt. Harveste blinked, smiled, the lipstick he had tried on smearing his lips with a macabre stain. A hand tapped his shoulder. "Hello, Fing. What do you think?" The dismembered hand flashed a thumbs up, then tucked something into a neat pile on the desk. It was a green satin ribbon. "It's lovely, thank you." As he gathered his hair up to tie it, he noticed movement in the mirror. The senbon fell to the ground with a faint tinkle, blocked by an expertly wielded dagger. Gomez laughed light-heartedly as he strolled into the room. "Well done, lad." "Almost got me there. Your mother's taught you well." "Thank you, father." His hands paused, watching the other man in the mirror. "Is everything all right?" "That's quite an unconventional look you have there, my lad." The green eyes dimmed in disappointment. Oh dear. He snagged a tissue and started to dab. "I'm sorry, father. I was just experimenting. I know it's not what boys do. It won't happen again." "Why ever not?" Harry had a second in which he looked confused before he was picked up and swung around. "My deadly little viper, you're an Addams. We live for the unconventional." So you don't mind?" "Mind? My dear boy, come along. Fing, Morticia, we're going shopping." The moan of the ancient organ drummed through the house, dust falling from ancient beams and rattling spiders from their webs. It was a haunting yet pleasing melody, quick and light, unbelievably inhumanly swift. "Can you believe," Gomez said with pride as he looked at the small figure dwarfed by the huge brass pipes, "that he hadn't touched an instrument in all his life, and now after 3 months." Harry's fingers floated effortlessly over the yellowed ivory and silky ebony. His thin wrists and delicate fingers belied the strength needed to coax out such strong notes. He was wearing his hair tied back today, a hint of green satin among the dark locks. A storm grey dress hugged his slim 7-year-old body, paired with sensible leather boots that tapped along to the beat. He composed it himself. Morticia's lips curved into a sultry smile as she leaned against her husband. "Such a talent in our lovely, beautiful little viper." "He takes after you, cara mia." "Oh, Gomez, the torture rack tonight?" The sound followed them, the maddening tempo building ever higher. "You look positively ravishing today, darling." "Thank you, Mother. Good morning, Father." 8-year-old Harveste sat down at home in the gloom of the kitchen. Granny Frump bustled by, putting a plate of breakfast in front of him. It burped. "Mother, when can I have a dress like Harry's?" His younger sister slid onto the seat next to his, her hair still in the severe braid from yesterday. She was a darling, as macabre and as fascinated by death as any little girl could be, with a penchant for homicide. "It's called a Cheongsam Wednesday." His smile was lizard-like, scuttling across his face like a snake on a hot rock. "I'll make you one if you like." But I want cat's eyes buttons, not skulls. Maybe Grandma has some lying around, Left jar! The grandmother grunted, waving a gnarled hand at the dusky Rex. Mind you, they're a bit fresh. Nothing a little liquid nitrogen can fix. He smiled again, scouring a scuttling bug with his fork and flicking it into the cauldron. It was always on nowadays. He couldn't imagine what Grammy put in it, but after the bug had glooped in, the seething brew turned a bright yellow. Thank goodness I've been trying to do that for ages. You've got quite the talent for potions, Harry. I learned from the best. He smiled demurely, long lashes dark against his pale skin. Then he blinked and moved his head to one side, just in time. The metal dart whispered past his cheek. Damn it! Missed again! Better luck next time. Harry flashed his swift smile at his brother. Happy birthday, Puxley. Good morning, Uncle Fester. Puxley Addams ran his hands through his short, bristled hair. He had toyed with the idea of getting it shaved, but he knew he couldn't pull it off with his uncle's pizzazz. Fester was just meant to be bald. Their father had done well by sculpting him when they were younger. 11 years old today. Gumme's ever-pleased voice boomed. What shall we do to celebrate? Explosions! Fester said immediately. A feast! Their grandmother cackled, her dull eyes burning with unholy light. I'll get you! We could kill someone and drain their blood and offer it to Kali for blessings. Wednesday offered. Been there, done that. We could kill a lot of someones. A party. Harry hid a chuckle behind his hand as they all turned to look at him. We haven't had the whole family together since Uncle Fester came back. We could even dig up the graves, wake the old ones up. A splendid idea, an old-fashioned Addams family reunion. Lurch! You whined. Invitations! We have to. What's that? Harry flung his hand up in the air just a few seconds faster than his siblings. The skewered bird thumped onto the table, Sambon through its still beating heart. There was a letter attached to its twitching lid. Pericles Feoso Addams, he read. New pen pal, Puxley. Their mother seemed to focus on the blurred feathers becoming sharper under the stark light that seemed to follow her eyes, obscuring the rest of her face. That's a Corvus Brachyrinchus, she said breathily. An American crow. Oh, Puxley, darling, it's your first wizarding school letter. That be Salem then, eh? Their father nudged Puxley in the ribs and winked. I got kicked out of it in my first term. Good times. Morticia Addams looked like a devastating fallen angel. 9-year-old Harry decided as he watched her and the rest of the female cousins with the tambourines. The beautiful sound of the Addams family mamushka was in the air. They were dancing it for Lumpy, their grotesquely handsome cousin who had just gotten engaged to Maleficent Penumbra. I wish I could be like her, his sister whispered beside him. Her dark eyes were on their mother too. They were perched precariously on one of the railings of the West Tower, high above the banquet hall, with its glass ceiling encasing everyone below like insects in amber. Their legs swung in the cold November air. Harry looked at his sister. At 7 years of age, she was starting to show grace and poise so inherent in the frump blood. Her long hair braided lay heavily on her back like a hangman's noose. She was wearing a Gothic dress, one he had made a few weeks ago. The black spider-like lace like knife cuts against her pallid skin. One day you will be as devastating as she is. Wednesday smiled thankfully at him, a curve of pink on her heart-shaped face. Hey, Harry. Hmm? He had worn leggings today in honor of the occasion and an emerald green corset laced with in a putrid yellow that stood out like lemons on a wound. Privately, Wednesday thought that Harveste looked more like Morticia than she did, as graceful as lightning and as deadly as poison. What's it like to kill someone all by yourself? An edge that flashed.
An edge that flashed in the light, dark warmth spilling over his hand, forming a river he never wanted to dam. The thrill, the desire coursing up his arms and into his soul. Freedom.
It's like breathing air for the first time. He purred into the night sky, remembering that night almost 4 years past. More delicious than cake, with the weevils in. You can't describe it. I'll show you sometime. A metallic flick made him look around. Wednesday! I thought we were going to quit smoking. 10-year-old Harry threw himself off the chair just as a dagger thudded into where his head had been. He rolled and ran, hearing the thud 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 of blades biting deep into the carpet behind him. As a safety precaution, he grabbed a letter opener, using it to pin his hair. No use in fighting with liabilities. He flung his hand out for a distraction, knowing better than to hope the Zenbond would work this time. There! The double-headed axe was heavy, but he grabbed it off the wall and swung it with the ease and precision of a warrior. It clashed against a shield, making a sizable dent. Good one! He caught the knife in one hand and pushing off against the desk to get airborne, sent it right back. It funked into the bookcase, skewering the first edition copy of A Tale of Two Cities. His father retaliated with a rapier. A bulky axe would be no match for it, but a throwing dagger might just connect. Crash! Ha ha! Harry scooted backwards, his eyes aflame with excitement and adrenaline. There was a tear in his sleeve, sliced open by the flashing blade, and the first drops of blood started to ooze down his arm. They tasted exquisite. He smirked wildly, darkly before dashing forward, his razor-lined fan at the ready. He ducked under the quick defense and whirled around. The fan flared, its sharp edges shining like silver. Gomez was the original duel master, though, but that didn't mean he would stop trying. He used his speed and to his advantage, moving in to strike before dancing out of the way of the following riposte. Gomez was the next to take a hit, the fan slicing shallowly over his cheek. A laugh like midnight bell cut through the haze of age-old dust and the clash of metal on metal. How enthusiastic! Harveste, make sure you leave enough of your father to eat dinner with. His pupils were dilated with adrenaline, bottomless pools over a shark-like smile. I'll try, Mother. Wednesday, I know you've got my hatchet. He knew his sister resented the fact that he too had received his school letters, but actually to go as far as to hide his weapons? Wednesday! Calm down, Harry. Puxley, now 14, had grown into the Addams bone structure. He wasn't as tall as Lurch, but he was getting there. He wore his strawberry blonde hair slicked back now, like their father. We could always hunt her down. I've half a mind to send cameras after her. Timberwolf Hybrid raised both its head off the floor, ears perked at the sound of its name. Better not. You know the scrap he got into with Kitty Cat? Loki's womb. Harry muttered, his long hair falling over his face. She's being a real... What have I told you about invoking gods in this house, my viper? Morticia stood in the doorway, arms crossed imposingly over her stomach. Little Pubert clung to her dress like a leech, a thumb in his mouth. Been at the graveyard again, my little demon? Harry purred, sweeping the toddler off the ground and pulling the appendage out of its greedingly murking maw. It looked livid enough to be fresh, graveyard dirt barely clinging to it. Pubert whined, and he gave it back. Forgive me, mother, not invoking without proper sacrifice, I know. Good. She crept forward into his room, her dress clinging like a loving vine to the floor. One of his suitcases was open, half filled with neatly folded peasant blouses and skirts, interspersed with rolled-up stockings and vials of poison. Along the edge were his knives, still managing to look painfully lethal inside their plastic sleeves. They were made of tempered steel, sharper than his mother's tongue and imported from her contacts in Japan. The full set had been his most treasured present for his 11th birthday, and he loved them. They were his next favorite weapon, next to the Zenbun and the razor-edged fan. They wouldn't be complete without the hatchet, though, and his eyebrow twitched in irritation when he noticed a mousetrap hidden in one of his shoes. You know she's just being supportive in her own way. She's going to miss you so much. I know, mother. He shook out the mousetrap. It snapped shut a few inches from his bare toes. I still don't get why you have to go all the way to Scotland, Puxley said, picking up the trap and ignoring the needles that had been hammered into its underside. He threw it out the window, where there was a crash and a distinctly non-Adam yelp. They smiled, Pubert taking the dismembered digit out of his toothless mouth and gurgled with pleasure. In case you've forgotten, I didn't receive a letter from Salem. One Addams is enough for them, I think. But it's Scotland! I can't exactly go to Beaubaton's, Puxley, Harry said, now arms deep in his closet. Pubert sat with him on the floor, severed thumb now forgotten in exchange for a vial he had found. Ah, there's my henbane. Put it next to the belladonna, will you, Pux? You look enough like a girl for them to accept you. His brother caught the vial and batted away the inevitable Senbon, but then widened his eyes at the smoke rising from his fingers. Harry winked at him, a smile still on his face as he searched for the other essentials. My own recipe. Where is that darn bathrobe? Wonderful use of doxy wings, my viper. Maman will be so proud. Puxley hummed noncommittally as he licked his fingertips. Tangy. Glad you think so, Harry huffed in annoyance, then gave up and stepped into the closet. There was a scream, quickly cut off. His voice was muffled, but clear above the sound of clashing metal. I don't want to go to Durmstrang either, and we're still banned from Haiti and Indonesia. Ah, yes, Morticia sighed happily in remembrance. There's nothing like the feel of the earth rending beneath your feet. Best honeymoon, Suna? Best honeymoon your father and I ever had. Good old dementia always keeps her word. Hogwarts is the only place left for me to go. Besides, they haven't had an Addams in years. Or so I've heard. It'll be nice to reacquaint them with our family. An explosion rocked the house and Harry stepped out, primly dusting off his shoulder. Green slime covered one arm and he dabbed at it with a tissue. Bloody boogeyman again. I swear they never learn. All the better to deal with, my dear. Their mother flashed them her fanged smile. I just know you're going to slay them over there, my viper. Venom gleamed in his eyes as he for a moment, and he felt like laughing. You can count on it, Mother. I have waited so long to record this again. This was the original recording, well, this fan fiction at least, didn't want to be recorded initially when I recorded it back a few months ago. But now here we have it. There will be a blooper because Cat, she just had to always interrupt again and again. Oh, gaat staan niet of nadelen. This baby just stepped on needles like it was nothing. She does not know how to take care of herself, just like you, so please drink and eat if you have not done anything today. Take care of yourself and have a lovely time of day or night. See you next time.